You believe your life is guided by conscious choices. But what if your childhood has been making those choices all along? Today, we will explore why your childhood may still be influencing your adult life.
You can be 50 years old and still 8 years old in the space of 4 seconds. You know this already. Somewhere underneath the career, the marriage, the title, the version of a stable life you've spent decades building. Your boss sends you 2 lines of feedback on a project, and your stomach drops before your brain even finishes reading the sentence. You know, logically, it's just notes. A comment on a document, nothing more. But something underneath that knowledge is already whispering something else. Something that has nothing to do with the actual words on the screen. I'm not good enough. They're going to find out. Your partner goes quiet for a day, maybe 2. Logically, you know they're tired, distracted, dealing with something that has nothing to do with you. But there's a colder, faster read running underneath that logic, one that doesn't wait for evidence before it renders a verdict. I'm being left again. That second voice isn't being dramatic for effect. It's old. It learned to read a room before you could read a book, and it never updated its software because nobody ever told it the emergency it was built for had ended. You are not overreacting to your boss or your partner. You are reacting to someone who isn't even in the room anymore, and you've been doing it for so long that you genuinely forgot there were 2 people responding, not 1. This is not a metaphor, and it isn't a personality flaw you need to apologize for. It's a structural fact about how you were assembled. Somewhere behind the adult who pays the bills and shows up to meetings on time and has, by every visible measure, made it, there is a much younger version of you still running certain decisions. Not all of them, just the ones that touch old injuries. And most people go their entire lives never finding out which decisions those actually are, because the younger version is good at his job. He doesn't announce himself walking in. He just takes the wheel for 4 seconds at a time, hands it back before you notice the handoff, and lets you believe the whole reaction, start to finish, was yours. Think about the last fight you had that escalated faster than the situation deserved. Think about the last time someone gave you completely reasonable feedback and you spent the rest of the day quietly furious or quietly collapsed, unable to say exactly why. That gap between how big the actual event was and how big your reaction was is not random. It's a measurement. It's telling you, with more honesty than you've probably given yourself credit for, exactly how old the wound underneath it really is. Maybe it was a meeting where someone talked over you, and for the rest of the day you couldn't shake a feeling you didn't have a name for, something closer to erasure than annoyance. Maybe it was your kid rolling their eyes at you, an entirely normal, forgettable thing for a teenager to do, and you found yourself unreasonably wounded by it for hours, replaying it, building a case in your head. In both moments, the size of the feeling didn't match the size of the event. That mismatch is the tell. It's not evidence that you're too sensitive, and it's not evidence that something is wrong with you. It's evidence that you got hit twice, once by what actually happened, and once by every other time it happened before, all the way back. There's a reason all of that felt true the moment you heard it, and it isn't a coincidence. A Swiss psychiatrist named Jung spent most of his working life trying to map exactly this. The parts of a person that operate without permission, underneath conscious thought, quietly running the show while the conscious mind takes the credit or the blame. He didn't call it your inner child, and he wasn't interested in comforting anyone. He called it something colder and considerably more accurate, a complex. Not in the sense of complicated, in the sense of a wound that turned into a pattern and then hardened into something that behaves exactly like a fixed part of your personality, even though it never actually was one. It was manufactured under pressure, at an age when you had no say in the matter. Here's how it starts. And it starts smaller than you'd think, smaller than most people are willing to admit. A child hears one sentence enough times. Why can't you be more like your brother? Why can't you just be easier? Why do you always have to make things difficult? And something in that child doesn't just feel hurt in the moment, it draws a conclusion. Children are relentless pattern matchers. They don't experience an insult, they extract a rule from it. The rule that gets extracted here is almost always some version of, I am not enough as I actually am. That conclusion doesn't fade with age the way a bruise does. It goes underground. It waits. And it is patient in a way nothing else in your life is patient, because it has nowhere else to be. 30 years later, that same person is climbing, achieving, quietly measuring himself against everyone in every room he walks into, calling it ambition, telling people, and half believing it himself, that it's just how he's wired. It isn't ambition. Ambition doesn't come with a stomachache attached to it. What's actually happening is a 9-year-old, still inside him, still trying to win an argument he never got to finish, using an adult's resources and an adult's vocabulary to keep fighting a fight that ended before he had the words for it. He'll spend 40 years in considerable success trying to answer a question nobody's asking him anymore. The tragedy isn't that he's still fighting, it's that he doesn't know he's the only one left in the room. Before you had a personality, you had a strategy. Somewhere in the first 10 years of your life, without anyone sitting you down and teaching you how, you figured out which version of yourself got fed, got attention, got left alone in peace instead of criticized. And you kept being that version long after it stopped being necessary, because nobody ever came back to tell you the emergency was over. That's the part almost nobody explains to you. Childhood strategies don't come with an expiration date. They just keep running, quietly, underneath a life that no longer requires them. One of the next few minutes is going to sound uncomfortably familiar, maybe more than one. Pay attention to which one makes your chest tighten slightly before your brain has decided why. Start with the most common one, because there's a real chance it's yours. You learned early that love in your house was conditional on being easy to deal with, not loved unconditionally. Loved on the condition that you didn't cause problems. So you became the child who never made things harder than they needed to be. You said yes when you meant no, and you got good at it fast because the alternative felt dangerous in a way you couldn't have explained at the time. You apologized before anyone had even accused you of anything, as a kind of insurance policy. You got extremely skilled at reading a room for rising tension and diffusing it before anyone else even registered it was there. And every adult around you called that maturity, and not one of them ever asked what it was costing a 7-year-old to carry that job. That skill followed you directly into adulthood, and it is, right now, today, quietly running your relationships without your permission. You still can't say no without rehearsing the sentence 3 times first. You still apologize for things that were never your fault, out of a reflex so old you can't trace where it started. Underneath all of it sits one sentence you have never once said out loud to another human being. If I disappoint them, they will stop loving me. You have never actually tested whether that's true. You've just never let yourself risk finding out. Maybe it wasn't that one. Maybe instead you learned early and repeatedly that your feelings were, at best, an inconvenience to the people around you. So you stopped bringing them up, and you got so good at needing nothing from anyone that people started describing you as low maintenance, easygoing, easy to have around, when what was actually happening underneath that description was that you had quietly gone missing from your own life. You can be in a room full of people who genuinely love you and still feel like you're watching the whole thing happen through glass. Underneath it, unspoken. If they see the real me, they'll leave. Or maybe you went the other direction entirely. Maybe you decided at some point too early to remember clearly that nobody was actually coming to help. So you would rather carry everything alone than risk needing someone and finding out again that they weren't there when it mattered. You call it independence now. It's closer to exhaustion wearing a very convincing costume. You've built an entire identity around not needing rescue, and it works right up until the exact moment you desperately do need it and don't know how to ask. Or maybe none of that ever quite fit, So you learned instead to push back against everything on principle, calling it freedom, calling it not being anyone's puppet, when what it actually was, underneath the posturing, was the only form of control a powerless kid could find in a house where nothing else was his to decide. 4 different strategies, 4 different children, learning 4 different rules, one underlying arithmetic running under all of them. Keep the love coming at whatever cost, using whichever method worked the very first time you tried it. You didn't choose which one you became. You were a child looking for the fastest available route to safety, and you took it the same way anyone would. The problem was never that you found a way to survive. The problem is that nobody ever came back, years later, to tell you the survival phase was finally over. Here's the part that's harder to hear, and I'm not going to soften it before I say it, because softening it would be a kind of lie. Your unconscious mind is not looking for happiness. It is looking for familiarity. Not because it's broken, and not because you're doing something wrong. Because familiar, to the part of your brain that has been running this operation since long before you could talk, has always meant safe, even when what's familiar is a version of pain you already know, from long experience, exactly how to survive. That's why the person who grew up with a parent who was never quite emotionally there keeps decade after decade, relationship after relationship, ending up across the table from partners who can't show up either. Not because they enjoy the ache, and not because they're choosing badly on purpose. Because something operating well below conscious choice recognizes the shape of the situation and relaxes into it the way you'd relax into a chair you've sat in 1,000 times before, even if that chair was never actually comfortable. It's home, not good, just home. And the nervous system, given the choice between good and familiar, will pick familiar almost every time, silently, without asking you first. Sit with that for a second before I explain it away, because there's a version of this most people rush past too quickly. It means some of your worst relationship decisions were never really about the person sitting across from you. It means the type you always end up going for might not be a preference at all. It might be a diagnosis you've been mistaking for taste for 20 years. It means you may have spent real years of your life chasing a feeling you called chemistry that was actually just recognition. And underneath even that, quieter, harder to admit out loud than almost anything else in this video. Most people caught in this pattern are not actually looking for someone new. They are trying to finish something old, somewhere in the part of you that never got what it needed the first time around. There is a hope that has never once been said out loud, maybe not even to yourself. Maybe this time I will finally get the love I never got. That hope is why the pattern doesn't just repeat itself. It repeats itself with full conviction, every single time feeling entirely new, entirely different, entirely justified, right up until the moment it isn't. And you're standing in the wreckage of a relationship that somehow, impossibly, looks exactly like the last one. There's a version of you that got rejected before you were old enough to defend it. And it did not disappear just because you stopped showing it to people. It went somewhere. Jung called that place the shadow. And the unsettling part isn't that it exists somewhere inside you. The unsettling part is that it's still driving, right now, today. Decisions you have been experiencing as entirely conscious, entirely your own choosing. You were told to stop being so angry over and over until you learned that your anger itself was the unacceptable thing, not whatever you were angry about. So now you can't set a boundary to save your life. You let people take more than they should, more than you're comfortable with, because objecting was never modeled as safe. And then, eventually, it comes out sideways. An explosion that seems to arrive from nowhere, aimed at someone who barely deserved the full weight of it, over something genuinely small. That explosion didn't come from nowhere. That was every boundary you were never allowed to set over years, finally overflowing a container that was never built to hold that much. You were told just as often that you were too sensitive, so you learned to shut it down at the source before anyone could laugh at it again. And now you can't let anyone get truly close without some part of you flinching, going cold, quietly finding a reason to leave first before you can be left. People around you call it guarded. You call it self-protection. It's neither, not really. It's a 10-year-old who got laughed at once, maybe more than once, for crying in front of the wrong person, and decided with total finality, never again. Here's the part that should actually bother you, more than the examples themselves. The traits you like least about yourself right now, the ones you'd change first if you had a working button for it, are very often exactly the parts of you that were forced underground earliest and hardest. They did not vanish when you buried them. They only stopped being visible to you. And what you cannot see, you cannot make a decision about. It doesn't ask your permission anymore. It simply decides for you and calls the decision your personality. You already know exactly what this looks like day to day because you have lived it more times than you have ever bothered to count. Someone criticizes your work, and for one full second, before your adult brain even gets a vote in the matter, you are certain, completely certain, that you are about to lose something important. Someone you love goes quiet for an afternoon, and your body reacts as though it's an emergency, fully and physically, before your mind has had time to confirm there's any actual threat at all. Someone tells you no, a small no, a scheduling no, a no that has nothing to do with your worth, and it doesn't land as information, it lands as a verdict on whether you matter. None of that was ever really about the coworker or the partner or the word no itself. It's the exact same 4-second hijack you heard about at the start of this video, playing out again in real time, disguised as an adult reaction to an adult situation. The question was never, why does this keep hurting me so much? The real question, the one worth actually sitting with, is who is answering the phone when it rings. Jung wrote one sentence that is heavier than almost anything else on this subject, and I want to say it exactly once, clearly, and then just let it sit there without rushing in to soften it or explain it away. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Read that again. It isn't therapy speak, and it isn't a slogan for a poster. It's a warning, plainly stated. Everything you have been calling your personality, your bad luck with people, your temper, your inability to fully trust anyone, your need to control every variable in a room, some real percentage of that was never fate at all. It was simply unexamined. And unexamined things do not politely go away on their own. They run on autopilot indefinitely, dressed up convincingly as who you are, right up until someone, until you, finally turns around and looks directly at them instead of past them. That's the entire shift this video has been building toward. Not fixing yourself as though you were broken. Not becoming someone new as though the current version of you were a mistake to be corrected. Just turning around, asking honestly and without flinching, why did that hurt so much more than the situation warranted? Why do I keep ending up here again, in slightly different clothes, with a slightly different name attached to it? Whose voice is actually running commentary when I tear myself apart over something small enough that a stranger wouldn't even notice it? What exactly am I so afraid people will find out about me? You don't need all the answers today, and you almost certainly won't get them today. You just need to start asking the questions like you genuinely want to know, not like you're performing self-awareness for an audience, including yourself. Jung had a word for where all of this leads if you actually follow it all the way through instead of stopping at the uncomfortable part: individuation. It sounds academic, clinical, like something reserved for a textbook. It isn't. It just means becoming the person you were before you learned to perform someone else for the sake of safety. Not a new you assembled from scratch. The original one underneath, minus the armor you build around him one incident at a time. That means finding the wound and calling it by its real name instead of by whatever cover story you've been using for it for the last 20 or 30 years. It means going back for the parts of yourself you were forced to disown, the anger, the need, the sensitivity, whichever one was yours, and letting them back in through the front door instead of guarding it against them forever, as though they were the enemy instead of just a part of you nobody ever welcomed. It means looking directly at your own shadow instead of flinching from it every single time you happen to spot it first in somebody else's behavior. And it means eventually on some ordinary Tuesday, catching yourself mid-reaction and choosing deliberately on purpose instead of running the same 4-second program you have been running unexamined since you were 7 years old. You cannot go back and change what happened to you. Nobody gets that option, not you, not anyone. But you can change what it is still doing to you right now, today, in rooms full of people who have nothing to do with your past and everything to do with the rest of your future. You are not the child who learned to disappear in order to stay safe. You are not the wound itself, and you are not the strategy you built around surviving it. You are the one person alive who is actually in a position to see all of it clearly. And the moment you finally do, it stops being fate. It just becomes something you get to choose. This will not happen in one sitting, and it will not happen because you watched one video, however much that video may have gotten under your skin tonight. It happens slowly in the ordinary moments. The 4-second window, the sharp reply you almost sent, the apology that was halfway out of your mouth before you noticed it wasn't yours to give. Each one of those moments is a small door. Most of your life, that door opened and closed without you ever knowing it was there. Now you know. That's the only real difference between fate and choice. Not the situation, not the feeling. Just whether you were standing close enough to the door to notice it opening.
Have you ever reflected on how the past continues to shape your understanding of yourself?
Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more deep explorations of the human mind.